For 100,000 years, our ancestors lived in a world where any morning could be their last. A predator behind the rock, a drought, another tribe with spears, and still they survived. Now, picture a group of creatures that faced none of those threats and went extinct anyway. This isn't a story about ancient humans, but it explains us better than any story about them. 4 males, 4 females, unlimited food, a perfect climate, no predators, no disease. Less than 5 years later, all dead. And a vet doing the autopsies couldn't name a single cause. That's the part that should hook you. Nothing broke from the outside. The whole thing rotted from within. Here's the question worth sitting with. If you take away every external threat, what's left to kill a society? Stay with me, because by the end, you'll have the real answer. And fair warning, it isn't the tidy little moral that gets passed around online. That version is wrong. What actually happened is stranger and far more useful, and it comes down to a group of mice their creator ended up calling the beautiful ones. Remember that phrase. This is Universe 25. The man behind it all was named John Calhoun, and he'd been turning the same question over for 20 years before these mice came along. It started in 1947 when he was watching city rats around Baltimore and noticed they refused to overpopulate. However much food and shelter a block offered, their numbers hit an invisible ceiling and stopped. He built them a rat utopia on a 1/4 acre of woodland and figured 5,000 would fit. They never grew past 200. Stranger still, even with food spread everywhere, the rodents crowded into the same few feeders as if they couldn't eat without a crowd. And that's exactly where their behavior began to rot. Calhoun called it the behavioral sink. Universe 25 was his attempt to capture the entire collapse from start to finish. In July of 1968, he settled his founders into rodent luxury. A pen 8 feet on a side, mesh tunnels leading to 256 little apartments, water and food that never ran out. Estimated capacity, nearly 3,800 mice. Keep that number in your head, because the colony never came close to it. Here it's worth pausing to remember something. The earliest humans lived in groups of 20 to 50. Anthropologists call that the optimal size, enough to share out roles, small enough that everyone was indispensable. The hunter, the healer, the storyteller, the guard. Not one of them was spare. That very indispensability held the fabric together more tightly than any wall. Universe 25 was an experiment in what happens when that balance breaks. For good. For the first few months, the mice settled in. Then, around day 104, the first pups appeared, and the numbers went vertical. There was nothing to kill them. Almost every pup survived, which never happens in nature, and the population doubled every couple of months. By day 315, more than 600 mice were jostling on the ramps. On paper, a success. In reality, the precise moment everything began to fall apart. The hinge the whole story turns on. In a normal world, when a place fills up, the surplus leave and start over. In Universe 25, there was no somewhere else. The walls were the edge of the universe. A whole generation grew up with no territory and no role. This is the very thing our ancestors spent hundreds of thousands of years escaping. They always moved on, founded new camps, spread across continents, invented new gods and new crafts. Movement was their protection. The mice had nowhere to move. And the generation split into 2 equally broken camps. Some males went completely slack, pooling into listless heaps. Attack one, and he wouldn't fight back. He'd just crawl off and lie down. The others were wired and frantic, breaking into nests, ignoring every ritual the rest still followed. 2 opposite breakdowns, 1 root. Far too many mice, and catastrophically, nothing for them to be. Then it reached the mothers. The males burned out, stopped guarding the nests, and the females had to defend and feed alone. Under that pressure, motherhood broke. They turned aggressive toward their own pups, abandoned them in random corners, stopped recognizing their own litters, and in the worst stretches, ate them. Almost no newborn survived to weaning. Calhoun was blunt. The social fabric had died long before the first body did. This was nothing new in the story of our species. Paleoanthropologists have found sites where people suddenly stopped burying their dead, stopped making ornaments, abandoned tools half-finished. No sign of catastrophe, just silence. Scientists call it a collapse of behavioral modernity. When a community lost its meaning, it stopped reproducing itself, not physically, but culturally. This is exactly what Calhoun was watching in real time. And that brings us to the beautiful ones. The handful of surviving pups were raised by mothers who didn't care, in a world where every role was already taken. Grown up, they bowed out of the game. They never fought, never courted, never mated, barely dealt with other mice at all. They ate, they slept, they groomed obsessively. Their coats were flawless, the best-looking mice in the colony, and they were already dead. A generation that looked immaculate and quietly opted out of being a species. It's tempting to say the same thing is happening to humans. And here it's worth being honest. There's no direct proof, but the resemblance is unsettling. In wealthy countries, more and more people choose to fold in on themselves, on their comfort, their self-care, their convenient lives where other people are more nuisance than meaning. Bonds weaken, friendships thin out. The willingness to invest in anyone but yourself fades. On the surface, everything's fine. Fed, safe, well-groomed. Sounds like the beautiful ones, doesn't it? Perfectly arranged on the outside, emptied out within. But you can't draw a straight line. Humans are more complicated than mice in a box. This isn't a diagnosis. It's a mirror you don't enjoy looking into. The ending is almost gentle compared to the middle. The peak, around 2,200 mice on day 560, in a world built for 3,800. A fifth of the apartments stood empty even then. It wasn't about a lack of space. Births dwindled to nothing. The mice lived out their days, and no one came up behind them. On the 23rd of May, 1973, the last mouse of Universe 25 died. Calhoun said the colony had died twice. The spirit went first, and the body just took a few years to catch up. The popular conclusion is punchy and simple. Comfort kills. But it doesn't hold up. The food never ran out. Meaningful roles did. Our ancestors didn't survive because life was hard. They survived because each of them was needed for something. By the tribe, by the children, by the coming winter. Take away that being needed, and neither comfort nor safety will save you. There's a sharper reading, too. Researchers argued the poison wasn't crowding, but forced, inescapable contact, plus a handful of aggressive mice who seized the best spots and locked everyone else out. And to be honest, whether any of this maps onto humans is genuinely up for debate. Humans aren't mice, and you can't draw a straight line from a pen to a civilization. It's a thought to hold, not a verdict. And that's exactly where Calhoun himself landed, the part nobody quotes. He was no prophet of doom. Right up until his death in 1995, he was trying not to predict the collapse, but to work out what you could put back into the box to prevent it. His answer matched what ancient humans did whenever they met an overcrowded world. Grow outward, into ideas, into new connections, into roles that didn't yet exist. They went over the horizon, invented writing, built cities, made up gods. The way out is to keep creating fresh reasons to be here. The mice couldn't do that. The walls were the walls. We can. That's the real meaning of Universe 25. The disturbing thing about it isn't what happened to the mice. It's that we, unlike them, get a say in whether their story becomes ours. If this is the kind of rabbit hole you'd happily fall down, hit like and subscribe to Primal so the next one finds you. I'll see you in the next video.